talk a little bit about how the findings in this poll, in fact, reflect a very interesting reality. And the reality is that we are in a very precarious economy, that we are haunted by the Great Depression, and we are very worried about the impact of certainly sudden changes in the budget on the situation in the present. So what appears to be a dichotomy in the poll actually reflects some very sound and sensible thinking. So if you look at what happened in Toronto over the weekend, right? You had the U.S. with our economists being terrified of the double dip, and Obama reflecting that. And you have the Europeans coming, being terrified of the mountain of debt, which they will face. And we have an elderly problem, we have a Social Security problem, we have a Medicare problem. Believe me, it ain't nothing compared to the European Union's problem. So if you take then the EU and the United States, you've got two sides of the brain, right? And you've got the kind of ambivalence that is nicely reflected in this poll. The answers are obvious, actually, because the public has told us the answers. The answer is a short-term and a long-term answer. The short-term answer, you create jobs. You don't put on a new tax the way Roosevelt did with starting a payroll tax in 1936. You don't put on new taxes. You don't do things that start contracting the economy in this very delicate stance, but you do build in the out years.
And what we see now is very uncertain consumer demand. You saw it dip in consumer confidence yesterday. You're seeing spurts of some sectors where demand is growing, but not enough to stimulate investment. In addition to that, you're seeing a lot of uncertainty about what costs are going forward. Now, these are real national issues that need to be resolved, but until they're resolved, they provide uncertainty, and business people hate uncertainty. We don't know how much healthcare reform is going to cost us. We just don't know. You know, we have a working group where the Roundtable is part of the let's implement this and let's improve it as we go along. We're not the repeal and replace group, so you can criticize us for that. But we don't know how much it's going to cost. We have financial regulatory reform that is overhanging the economy right now. We don't know how much that's going to cost. It could impose serious costs on us. We want to do something about global climate change and global warming, and there have been several proposals, but they're not moving forward, and we don't know how much that's going to cost. And we don't know what the response to the deficit crisis will be in terms of our own obligations as corporations to pay for taxes. So uncertainty in and of itself is dampening the kind of investment that would spur increased economic activity, because this is unprecedented uncertainty. These are unprecedented costs. But at the same time, it has to be combined with demand.
The political dynamic that needs to be created in order to get to people's values is they have to feel that everybody is in it. So take the question, which has been much discussed lately in these budget circles, of tax expenditures, right? I mean, the tax expenditure that liberals love to hate is the oil depletion allowance. Okay, that liberals love that, to hate that one. But the fact of the matter is, what's the biggest
foreign deferral, actually.
Or foreign deferral they really love to hate.
Is really trump the oil depletion.
What's the biggest tax expenditure? Of course, the exemption on our health care. Wow. And followed closely by the exemption of mortgage interest payments. So the biggest tax expenditures are, in fact, us. Things that middle-class people love, okay, as opposed to love to hate. Now, you can imagine a package that, in fact, begins to whittle away at these tax expenditures, and everyone is in the package. Nobody's exempt from the package. And if you go back to the rare times in history when we've managed to do this, the dynamic is Americans, they're not totally adverse to giving up something or sacrifice, but they have to feel that they're not the only ones. They have to feel that this is universal and it's happening across the board. Coincidentally, that's sound economics.
One party or another, one administration or another is just going to have to take the lead and say this is what has to be done, irrespective, for the long-term future of the country. I mean, irrespective of the political consequences. Because if you look at this, this is the best advertised, the most obvious, the longest-term train wreck that faces the United States. We know exactly what's going to happen. Everybody knows. Everybody has the same data in front of them. Everybody understands the economic consequences. Everybody understands when it's going to pick a year within 3 or 4 or 5 years when it's going to start to unravel and from which you cannot recover. And ultimately, it will take leadership to stand up and say, I don't care about the political consequences, or I do care about the political consequences, and I'm going to bet my political future on the fact that the majority of Americans want it solved for their children and their grandchildren.